want your hypothesis that you put in that first pitch deck to come true. And even when customers are telling you that you were wrong, you try and force the fucking
No, you don't
hypothesis.
know.
Yeah, yeah. But when your game is to be successful, there's a couple of really interesting things that I observe happen. One of them is I watch founders say, actually, maybe I'm not the best person to be CEO.
Yeah.
Even though I founded this thing, maybe I should be chief brand officer. When I think about some of the top companies in the UK represent just valued at 100 million, Gymshark, Ben's business valued at 1.5 billion, Julian's business probably valued at a billion. I'm involved in some of these businesses in different ways. But the thing they all have in common is at some early point, the founder put their ego secondary to the success of the business. They said, actually, I'm not the best CEO. I should be head of brand or marketing.
Or product,
Or
right.
product or whatever it is. And that's that mindset shift from being, I need to be right and I need to be at the helm of being right versus this thing needs to be successful.
And this goes back to the who, which is if you at some point, if you want to have a really ridiculously successful company, it will require more lifetimes of expertise than you can live. And so then it becomes a recruiting game. Like very quickly, almost all business becomes recruiting, which is how do I mean, if you listen to Zuck talk about it, you listen to Elon talk about it, you listen to Steve Jobs talk about it. Steve would talk about how the best players that he had in the company, he would set aside like a year to 18 months to bring them in.
Amen.
And he said, every time I knew who I wanted. And then he's like, I would take some calls with other people and I would just be like, but they're not John. They're not John. And so he would just keep working on them and working on them and working on them. And so eventually they're like, you know what? Fine. They like give up. And they're like, if this guy is this persistent, like he probably will be a successful entrepreneur and he will take us there. And I think that like people are the highest leverage thing that you can bring into the company outside of, crazy technology.
One of my favorite videos of all time is where Steve Jobs, who you just mentioned, talks about hiring truly exceptional people. And he says words to the effect, I'll play it on screen. He says, people think the success of Apple is a consequence of me and my talent and my skills. But what I've actually done is I've built my career, quote, on hiring truly exceptional people, doing the extremely hard work of finding them and hiring them. And this crazy thing happens when you do that, is it propagates. I.e., A players then want to work with A players. They also hire A players and it spreads. I think it was this video.
I've built a lot of my success off finding these truly gifted people and not settling for B and C players, but really going for the A players. And I found something. I found that when you get enough A players together, when you go through the incredible work to find 5 of these A players, they really like working with each other because they've never had a chance to do that before. And they don't want to work with B and C players. And so it becomes self-policing and they only want to hire more A players. And so you build up these pockets of A players and it propagates.
The thing is that it's just like money won't make you happy. It's one of those things that like every founder like has to figure out for themselves. But the thing is and I've had obviously a bunch of conversations around this, but like what you think is an A player today is not what you will think an A player is in 5 years. And so I think one of the hardest mental hacks around this is trying to project yourself into the future, into the size business that you want to have, and say, who would be an A player at that size and scale? And then coming back to the present and saying, how do I get them to work for me today?
Amen.
And it's really, and so as a mental process for anybody who does have a business right now and has some employees, if you, like everybody right now, you probably have some version of your A player because every business has at least one, hopefully, right? Besides you. Imagine your business had 5 of those people. Like you picture in your head, you've got that one person, now you have 5 of them. How much more would you make? Would you double? Would you 10x? Would you 50x? And sometimes you realize you're like, no, I think I would actually 10x. And so if that were the case, 1, not only would you 10x the company, number 2, the value of the company would more than 10x because it would no longer be, it would be significantly less reliant on you and it'd be more reliant on the team that you've built. Number 3, it would happen faster because you would have more barrels that were firing concurrently, moving things forward. And those pieces, when put together, you have to then ask yourself from an opportunity cost perspective, what other activity could I be doing that would have the possibility of 10xing my company, doing it faster, and increasing the enterprise value multiple, that's not that. And if you can't find one, then it means you're working on the wrong stuff. And I think that is one of those great litmus tests of like, if I can find something, and I'll give you a really simple one that's not the talent based here. Something as simple as calling your leads. So there's tons of research that suggests that you can 4 or 5x your conversion of leads by calling them within 60 seconds of them opting in for any product you have. If you have all of these priorities that you have across the company, does any of them have the high likelihood of 4 or 5xing your business immediately with very low cost of doing so? Less so than just calling the leads within 60 seconds. If the answer is no, then by God, why are you not calling all your leads within 60 seconds? The follow-up question would be like, well, I don't have enough people to call our leads within 60 seconds. So then we'd say, okay, what is 4x the revenue of your company worth? Okay. What does it cost to hire one person whose only job is to just call the leads? Now, I recently talked to a restoration company. So they did water damage for homes when they got hit by storms. And he told me, he said he was converting 55% of his leads, not calls, leads. And I was like, how on earth are you doing this? And I was like, well, how many leads a day do you get? And he said 2 or 3. I was like, okay. So what's the process? He's like, oh, it's really simple. My aunt, I pay her $60,000 a year, and she has only one job. She has no responsibility in the company besides the moment a lead comes in, you stop having sex with your husband, you stop cooking, you stop loving your child, and you immediately call the lead. That's the only responsibility. She just has to make 3 calls a day at the moment the leads come in. And he pays her $60,000, and that brings in millions of dollars of revenue. And so you're not going to pay for it out of the dollars you have now. You're going to pay for it out of the dollars that you're going to make that you're not making yet because you haven't done it yet. And so, pin in that. Back to the people. I think the hardest time, we call this the swamp at acquisition.com, but it's usually between like 1 and 3 million is the swamp. And I think there's a numbers reason for why it's such a painful period for entrepreneurs. Let's say 1 million for simple math. If you have $1 million business, let's say that you have 20% margins. So that means you're making $200,000 a year in profit. For you to get an A player, it's probably going to cost you 100% of your profit to get that A player. And so you'll have what appears to be an impossible choice. You'll have, do I sacrifice basically 100% of my profit to bring this person in? Or do I work another 6 hours a day to do the job that this person is doing? Both paths work. Both are painful and risky because the overworking yourself thing, you can get yourself through that hump. And then now you're at maybe 3 or 4 million, and that 20% is 800. You can spend 200, you still have cash flow, you can still live. The downside for the picking the person path is that what if you pick wrong? And this, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is why entrepreneurs get outsized returns, is because we take on outside risk. And so this is the job, is that we have to be willing to make impossible choices. And the vast majority of choices for entrepreneurs in the business are impossible choices between 2 relatively bad scenarios. Yeah. Because the rest of the choices don't even feel like choices because they're obvious. Of course we should call our leads faster. Of course we should follow up more. Of course we should try and onboard faster. Okay, all of these things are the obvious ones. But when you have, man, I'm trying to think of the ones that I'm not sure. Almost all the decisions that you get stuck with, and Elon says this really beautifully. He says, running a business is like staring out to the abyss and chewing glass. He said, because the staring out to the abyss component of it is just the fact that this may never work, and you're almost facing existential risk at all times to the business. And the eating glass component is that you will, by nature of your role, get funneled the worst problems in the business and the problems that no one else can solve. So it's 1, problems that people can't solve. 2, the worst ones, or that they don't want to solve and they suck. Yeah. And so you basically become a filter for the worst things. And that's why it feels like a fire every single day in the business, because you're the only one who can make the tough call, because no one else wants to choose between these 2 impossible choices. And you're like, why is it so hard? And the thing is that it literally never stops being hard. It's that the currency that you pay for in the hardness changes. And so a lot of people have this envisionment of like the Rocky cutscene of like, it must be hard for business. But I don't think that's where the hardship comes. I think the hardship is that at every level of business, there's new sacrifices that you didn't know you were going to have to make. Because if it was just, oh, I have to work long hours, there's tons of people who work long hours in their business and don't grow. And it's usually because they're unwilling to have a hard conversation. It's a different currency, right? They have to take on risk. It's a different currency. They have to make some sort of bet, right, that they otherwise wouldn't have had to make. They have some sort of legal issue that they encounter. They have an employee who tries to sue them for some sort of whatever, right? All of a sudden you're like, wait, all of these things are happening, and they happen on a regular basis. And at each level, you unlock new levels of glass that you get to chew through. And so this is why, like, most entrepreneurs, in my opinion, don't actually quit. They fizzle. So it's not a big bang. Usually it's they stop seeking. So either they get content at the level that they're at and they just don't strive for more. And sometimes they say it just wasn't worth the trade. And I respect that. If you're like, you know what, I'm at $1 million a year and I don't want any more, fine, you won. Congratulations. Like, you won at life. But most of the times they don't really quit. They just stop trying. And then they just either coast or it just fizzles into nothingness. And that's just my experience of having, and I'm sure you've seen this, having gone through like cycles of entrepreneur. It's like seasons. It's like, oh yeah, I came in through, and even like in the media and influencer space, whatever. It's like, there's a bunch of guys that 10 years ago, it's a different landscape now than it was 10 years ago. Some people adapted. Some of them were like, I don't like they weren't willing to chew the new glass, which is, how do I learn TikTok? How do I learn? But man, blogs were so good. It's like, yeah, and they're not anymore. I talked to an entrepreneur, really massive, many hundreds of millions a year in sales. And he was like, dude, we were killing it on infomercials. So TV. And he's like, we really just have to crack YouTube. And I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, it's 2024. Like, what, like, you needed to crack YouTube 10 years ago. And he had the resources to do it. But it was just a different kind of hard. And so most of the hard is, one, a level of uncertainty that goes into it, and almost certain immediate failure. Because the first thing you're going to do will probably not work. And again, it's the iterations of, when you get into the new domain, you have to transfer your generalized knowledge, which is that as an entrepreneur, I will know that this doesn't work, probably because I only know 4 things about it. And I need to know like 400. And so I will get my first shot and I need to get directionally correct and then just keep doing more of that. And so I gave the consulting way of learning kind of like a new space. But if you want to learn a new skill, the fastest way that I do it, that's outside of courses or anything, is tremendous volume of activity. So whether that's like, I want to take a lot of sales calls, I want to do a lot of outreach, I want to make a lot of content, I want to do a lot of customer success calls, whatever it is, you do 100 of those. And then you see, what are the top 10% of these? Okay, what did these top 10% have different than the other 90? And then I say, okay, well, these ones had these 3 things that were different.